Dearest Ross, I have finally worked up enough courage to write you. I am your greatest fan, because unlike the others, I want nothing from you. The only thing that matters to me is your happiness. I am a friend, and I am someone you can turn to in times of distress. But I know the time is now right. We will be lovers very soon, my darling. And believe me, I have all the necessary equipment to make you very, very happy.
You got a really raunchy letter from that weirdo fan I tried to tell you about.
I think she's taking advantage of you.
Sally, he's driving me crazy.
I recommend you fire. I recommend you fire.
What in God's name did you say to him in your letter? I don't pay you to upset my fans. You don't even know your fans. I'm the one that has to put up with him. He's the one that's gone too far. He wants to be your lover, for Christ's sake. What was I supposed to do, give him an appointment?
I want to touch you. I want to make love to you.
Just ignore him from now on. He's harmless.
Miss Goldman? My darling, it was over very quickly and I feel glad because I never wanted her to suffer.
We're dealing with a psychotic, a potential killer.
Am I safe, Inspector?
Who knows?
He's after me now, isn't he?
The Fan.
Welcome back to the show, everybody.
Welcome back. We have a 1981 double feature.
This movie, I was on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, we just did Mommy Dearest, and this movie came out also in 81.
Oh, it did
Also a
indeed.
Paramount release.
How about that? How about that? Well, I mean, this movie was a thrill a minute, I have to say. But everybody out there listening, fans of the show, my name's Pete.
And I'm Scott,
and these are the movies that made us gay. Oh, goodness gracious. Scott.
We have a very special guest. I mean,
We do. We have a
an
fun guest.
Instagram celebrity as far as I'm concerned,
Well.
because, Jeff, I love your page. Jeff Nelson from Jeffrey Mixed. Your Instagram is so amazing. I love
Welcome
it.
to the show.
You guys are very kind. Thank you. I'm often surprised that my campy sensibility has gone the distance and has attracted many of people that seem to be on the same page and have a sense of humor. And I literally am grateful for the commentary that happens every day. It's a lot of people are fun and it's a blast to do. And I was just telling this to somebody the other day. It's literally my sensibility, 100% authentic. I can't explain it any other way. People are like, how do you come up with this stuff? I'm like, I'm just being me. It's the eyes of Jeffrey Mars. You know?
It's definitely
awesome.
our brand of bullshit at Movies That Made Us Gay, so we love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we watched The Fan from 1981. So The Fan was a movie that I think that our guest and friend of the pod, Tim Murdoch, I think told us about this movie on like episode 4 when we were doing Poltergeist 3. He's just like, have you guys seen The Fan? And I'm just like, the Wesley Snipes like baseball movie? And soon all of these people, all of my friends just started mentioning The Fan. We mentioned earlier off mic our friend Mike Toscano, who's done the show numerous times, has talked about this movie. I originally reached out to Mike to do this movie, and he's just like, well, you should have Jeff Nelson on because he works for Shout Factory. He did the commentary. He is like the Fan expert. So you are the perfect guest for this episode.
Well, what a high honor to
Yeah.
be. I mean, and what's funny is that yes, I am a marketing director for Scream Factory, and I co-founded that brand. And we put out all these crazy horror films and sci-fi films, and I never thought I'd see the day where we would release The Fan. And when we got that title, I was like, I will take this one over, guys. I know this one, and. So when we put it out, fall of 2019, a lot of ducks in a row just came together. Michael Biehn came to the table to be interviewed, and I got some great people on the commentary, David Del Valle and David Dakota. And but at the time, I purposely, to my coworkers, to my friends on my Instagram page, I made myself as an obsessive fan to make this kind of meta, as a fan obsessed about a movie called The Fan, about an obsessed the fan, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And so now my reputation is still, I guess it'll be locked with this film.
I love that. So, like we said, this is from 1981. I feel like it has a very cult, very niche following.
Yeah.
Right. And we did watch the Blu-ray, and the Michael Biehn interview was very interesting for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is when he says, you know, people come up to me all the time because he has this genre following, and I love Michael Biehn from, you know, Aliens and Terminator and all of that. But when he said, hey, you know, when people come up to me today, when grown men come up to me and say, I love The Fan, he's like, oh, they're gay. And I'm just like,
usually a friend of Dorothy.
I love that. That's so amazing.
So off camera, and maybe even before that interview, because I actually interviewed him personally, we had talked about that film for a long time on just the gay fan following.
Right.
First, I have to say to anybody that's listening is that Michael Biehn, I've been fortunate to have interviewed a few celebrities in my time. I'm a little older. Michael Biehn was one of the most down-to-earth, real, and blunt like actors I'd ever spoken to. And on this specific topic, he asked me, like, why does this have such a gay following? And I went through like a list of everything. He was really receptive to me. And he didn't have a problem. He said that he probably had a little bit of a kind of, not problem, but a little bit of he didn't take to the film after it came out and for years, for a while, because it didn't have a good reputation.
Right, yeah.
And it is, as you guys said, a niche following, whatever. But as the years went on, he's come to sort of accept that, like, oh, okay, I got a gay following in this. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And when I told him all the reasons, he cracked up. He was not, as you guys heard on that Blu-ray, you know, you have a big diva in this film, Lauren Bacall.
Yeah.
That's one that's gay men are going to be attracted to. And he didn't have a good time with her. She didn't have a good time with him. And, said a lot of words off camera that didn't get onto the interview about her.
Wow.
But he was a blast. And I love the fact that he was relaxed with me, totally got it. And, you know, there were some things you could tell in that interview where he was saying it, where he might have been a little, I wouldn't say nervous, but a little kind of like slightly uncomfortable talking about it. But trust me, he gets it.
Yeah. That's really cool, because I grew up with Michael Biehn. I mean, I love,
same,
you know, the big characters that, you know, that he's talked about, and to see him be candid about it, and kind of, you never know, right? You never know if he's going to be like not appreciative of a certain fan base. And I think that definitely, aside from The Fan, he does have like a gay geek following, because I mean, Kyle Reese, he's so cute.
He's so handsome.
Just so
handsome as Kyle
in
the
these
Terminator.
movies, you know? And so I think like the gay nerd following out there is just like, oh, Kyle Reese, whatever. But then, throw Lauren Bacall into the mix. I feel like I probably, from following your account, just have this knowledge of High Point coffee commercials.
I look forward to my sixth cup as much as my first one. That's because my coffee's High Point decaffeinated. I don't need caffeine. I'm active enough, thank you. But that's just one reason this coffee lover chooses High Point. Oh, that aroma's wonderful. Just look at this deep, rich color. But you know what really matters to coffee lovers? This. Deep and rich. Flavor this good has to be deep brewed into a coffee.
High Point coffee. I can't even do a Lauren Bacall.
High Point coffee. The flavor. Those obviously are from the same time period, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just the camp of those late 70s, early 80s commercials where they would talk to you. They would talk to the camera. And the fact that it's Lauren Bacall talking to me about instant coffee is, I mean,
and she would sometimes be like rehearsing a play, and it would just be kind of a candid moment, and she would just talk to you, the viewer, through the TV about coffee.
She was on it. It's interesting that she took this role, and this movie. Sorry if I'm schooling people, and you guys have already heard it, but I'll just go into it a little bit.
No, please.
The movie was based on a best-selling book, and it was nabbed by the producers who did Grease and Saturday Night Fever. Robert Stigwood. Also family, and I believe in some of the stuff that made it in the Blu-ray and some didn't. That I think Elizabeth Taylor was considered for this role of Lauren Bacall's role in the film. I think even Shirley MacLaine. I think even Anne Bancroft. That's a lot of ladies, and I guess the script was a lot different. By the time they got Lauren Bacall was doing Broadway at this time. She was doing those High Point commercials. It was still regarded as Hollywood royalty from, all the years ago. And so she was kind of riding a little bit high. So it kind of made sense that, she was playing lead and that she would be attracted to this film. But somehow down the line, what was put in front of her and what she signed up to be, which was supposed to be some psychological thriller, turned into Dressed to Kill, Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Her film mixed in with stuff. She was not happy with the outcome, even though her name was top bill, whatever. It's a interesting mess of a film.
Right.
And Michael Biehn, he was an unknown. He'd been in a couple of little dinky films or whatever, but this was supposed to be his breakout. And we're talking about him, so they did something right on a cult following. But this movie was not a hit. We'll go into all those reasons why.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting because Lauren Bacall, like I said, I could see probably not that I could think exactly like her, but she's like, oh, I'm a leading role. And there's not a whole lot of movies out there for a leading role with a woman of her age at that time. Be like, oh, sure, let me sign it up. But what she signed up for and what ended up happening, well, now that's why it's a gay favorite.
And also kind of putting yourself in Lauren Bacall's shoes of when you find out this psychological thriller that's almost kind of recalling Clint Eastwood's Play Misty for Me, but just kind of a gender swap with it. And kind of when Lauren Bacall kind of found herself in this elevated slasher movie, she probably goes to her peers of this is what happens when actresses age out and they just start doing genre movies. And that's probably not what Lauren Bacall really saw herself doing in 1981 at the time.
It's funny because if you're Robert Stigwood, the producer, and if you're Paramount Pictures, who picked this up, because it was originally, speaking of Dressed to Kill, it was originally from the production company that did Dressed to Kill. At the time in 1981, you had all these slasher films that were going big time. Friday the 13th and Prom Night and Terror Train and My Bloody Valentine. All these movies were swirling around. I think that the marketing department and Paramount, and my guess is that they wanted to have their cake out of that. And they positioned the film as a slasher film. If you look at any of the TV spots or the poster or the trailer, there's no mention of Lauren Bacall or Maureen Stapleton or James Garner. It's about the fam, and which is weird because you have these big heavyweights. Why would you target their audiences? But since those audiences are older, you know what I mean? But then younger audiences into Friday the 13th would look at something like a fan and be like, who are these, I hate to say it, old people running around in the theater getting slashed? This isn't Jason. This isn't, I need teenagers, in a summer camp. Like, this isn't, it's such an odd mix.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why I love it so much.
Yeah, and I think today a modern viewer kind of would look at it and see that psychological thriller aspect of it. Like while there is someone running around with a straight razor and stabbing the help and all of that, yeah, it doesn't quite fit into the teen slasher genre of the early 80s. So I can see where they were going, but I can also see why people might have been, upset about it. I think I read in like IMDb trivia that James Garner was just like, oh, that piece of trash. Like he didn't really care for it either.
Yeah. The other thing too, the fan actually holds better now than it did when it came out, because when it came out, John Lennon was assassinated.
Yeah.
Jodie Foster had an obsessive fan at the time. There was a bunch of these in the news kind of stories that were happening that was novel at the time or new at the time of having these celebrity stalker type of things. So Paramount had that fine line of like, they weren't and they were directly trying to draft off of it. But I think with Reagan being shot at the time, the Pope, all this kind of stuff, I think people were just not in the mood to see like something called The Fan.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think that they were there. And then plus all the other marketing mistakes of like, well, why wouldn't you call out Lauren Bacall? Why wouldn't you like do all that? I think that her and James Garner probably were like, don't put my name on this.
Right.
Sure.
There had to have been some behind the scenes, like, I don't want to be associated with this, piece of garbage or whatever. and yet it's not a piece of garbage.
Right.
Guys, watch this. It's a well done film.
Beautifully photographed.
But it's classy-ish. It's not Dressed to Kill, but it's elevated. It is not Motel Hell.
Right.
No offense to Motel Hell, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, they wrote and choreographed a musical within this movie. That's a lot of work.
There's and the choreographer Arlene Phillips. I mean, she's a well-known. I mean, there was a
Tim Rice, the lyricist.
The editor who Alan Heim, who did All That Jazz. The score by Pino Donaggio, who did Carrie and Dressed to Kill. There's a polishedness to this film that you don't normally see. But then the Straight Razor murders come in and some of the graphic stuff, and you're like, whoa, I wasn't expecting. And then, as we're here talking about it, all of the gay overtones, undertones, like it's dripping with gay without saying gay.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Throughout the whole film.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We've watched Cruising for the podcast, Dressed to Kill, all those movies, and it definitely has that kind of vibe. But this particular movie, I feel like it's quick, it's snappy. It's like it goes by in 90 minutes.
It has a pretty quick pace to it.
Yeah, it's really well paced, especially for a movie of that era. For modern viewers, our main older stars in it, Lauren Bacall, Maureen Stapleton, this character,
pretty much
love.
Just playing the Thelma Ritter role from All About Eve.
Pretty much.
And James Garner. With the three of them, the amount of smoker voice action in this movie with the three, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I just love that that just kind of voice and timbre. And then Lauren Bacall is in there with that mid-Atlantic thing going on.
Well, and Lauren Bacall's character in the film, from the interviews that you saw and from the conversations I had off camera with some of the talent, it wasn't a stretch for her to be a bittered, older, demanding kind of, now they want me to be in this cockamamie musical type of diva type of thing. It doesn't feel like it was so removed from where she was at the time.
Right.
Which, of course, for us gay guys, we love seeing women, and especially stars that are maybe past their quote-unquote prime, sort of going for broke in a sleepy kind of it goes back to the whatever happened to Baby Jane thing. There is something about divas doing that kind of thing in their later part of the career. And to his credit, Ryan Murphy has been able to do that successfully, and I'm not saying that Jessica Lange and some of the actresses or whatever that he has chosen, they're in any sort of sleazy, but he's been able to take that same principle of taking a diva or sort of past her quote unquote prime and putting her into a contemporary new thing and making it work. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. I mean,
Absolutely.
What makes Ryan Murphy so remarkable in TV that he casts women that should be working more. It was like Sharon Stone in Ratchet. It's just like how much fun was that to see her in that type of role? Because we don't really see Sharon Stone in roles like that anymore.
Right. Well, I mean, I look at what he does for Kathy Bates, even just in general.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite actresses. And he continues to give her work, and that is a plus. So going back, we're going off script, of course. Back to the fan. You mentioned cruising, and you mentioned Just to Kill. One of the things I wanted to bring up too is that another thing that's fascinating about this film is that it was made in New York City at a time when New York City was one of the most dangerous,
grimy New York
possibly be. And there were so many movies at that time that were set in New York, like Cruising and Dressed to Kill, Maniac, Eyes of Laura Mars, Taxi Driver, The Warriors, Escape from New York. I mean, The Sentinel. You could go on and on and on and on. And the fact that the fan is also there is just another like, well, here you go. We're living in New York, you know.
You guys call it disco noir on the commentary. I love that.
After Klute, in the early 70s happened, Eyes of Laura Mars really kind of opened up that door.
That's with Faye Dunaway, right?
The kind of thriller. And then Dressed to Kill really did it well. But let's be honest, it was also cheap for filmmakers like Maniac or Don't Go in the House or whatever like that, just to, you know, drive up Times Squares and film some sleazy scenes and then move on. But it's interesting because I'll look at the locale whenever I watch The Fan, the subways, which of course Dressed to Kill is a very similar sequence, and just some of the skyline and stuff. But it just represents another layer that I love about The Fan. It's because New York now is definitely not the New York it was back in the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that one of the first things we see is just what is the name of the show that she's in? Never Say Never.
Hold on. What'd you say?
Never Say Never.
Never Say Never.
Never Say Never. It's just up there in lights. Her name, you know, it just, and then it pans down to her at the stage door. Yeah, just the whole idea of putting on a show and, you know, the rehearsals and coming out of the stage door and all of the fans just going right up to her and having this access, you know, to this woman.
How that you guys said that it was a stunt woman that takes the pen out of her hand. If you watch that actress in that scene, the look on her face, and when she grabs that pen and bolts across the street and then trips, it's so good.
It's very crazy. But what I love about it, though, of course, is that Michael Biehn trips her.
Yeah.
And basically it's kind of like, okay, you think you're a fan, like you're nothing. But it's still another level of like you realize something's wrong with Michael Biehn because, you know, he just pulled this, you know, poor woman who just stuck, you know, who should not have stolen a pen in the first place from Lauren Bacall. But then it's an awesome opening scene. I really like how the movie starts. And then, of course, it shows Michael and Lauren both leaving to their respective homes in an alone kind of eerily similar path.
Yeah.
But neither one of them, you know, obviously only Michael knows Lauren exists and Lauren has absolutely no idea, but they're both alone. And there's a weird kind of thing in this film, and I touched upon it on the commentary. You know, as much of the campy numbers are there, and there's Lauren Bacall, and there's some outrageous moments, and then there's I'm sure we'll talk about the gay rooftop scene. There is a little bit of a sadness, a little bit of a current that goes throughout the film because Michael, like, look, we all love our divas, our singers, our actors, our actresses, or whatever. I would like to think that none of us would go to the extent of Michael Biehn. But there is that like, oh, I like you, I'd like for you to like me type of thing. And that runs current through the whole thing. It's kind of like what you said about Play Misty for Me. It is a reverse kind of thing on that. And it plays on that same type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can all, as gay men, and even like straight people too, just relate to idolizing someone so much. And you just think, if I were to just meet this person, we would be the best of friends. Like that just needs to happen. If it can happen, like my life will be complete.
Do you know how many probably gay men probably think that of Madonna?
Oh my goodness.
I love Madonna, but I would never meet her because I'm also kind of petrified of Madonna.
and for me, I would have no problem. I would say, literally, if I had my chance with Madonna, I would say, I know that you will probably scoff at this, but I just need to tell you that Causing a Commotion is my all-time favorite song. Thank you for making it, and they can make with that what it is. And I don't care if you would sneer or whatever. I would give my thank you and I would move on.
Yeah,
you know,
that's all you can do.
But I'm sure you guys have too, and I have too. I've been lucky. I've met some of my idols, and some of them, you're right. It's almost an impossible expectation sometimes that you put on people that you idolize or that you love, because you may want them to be your best friend, a mom, a super strong dad, sexy, whatever it is. And then you meet them sometimes and they could be having, just like we do, a bad day, a bad moment or whatever. And then you're like, oh, thankfully it's only happened a couple of times. I won't tell you the names.
I love the idea in this movie that he writes letters. He types these letters out on this typewriter that we get these extreme close-ups on several times in the movie. He writes these letters, sends them off in the mail, and they're actually read and answered by the assistant character played by Maureen Stapleton. And it's like, today, I guess the closest thing we would have to that is probably social media.
Just Instagram comments.
Comments on Instagram, things like that. And maybe somebody will answer it back or like a tweet, or retweet you, things like that. But I think even the secretary answering him back, I think, to me, I know his level of fanaticism and mania is a little elevated. So to him, Maureen Stapleton's not good enough. I don't want the secretary to answer me. I want you to answer me, But to me, if I got a response even from the secretary of whomever I wrote to, I'd be like, holy shit, this was in their house. Someone on their staff read it that has access to them.
Right. Well, it's funny that you say that, because on Instagram, social media of today, some celebrities have actual people work their sites for them, so they're not really them. But there are also a lot of them, like Amy Sedaris, for instance. She does her own page. If she comments on something, or Johnny Knoxville, that's them. So I know this for sure, just because these are two particular ones that I've at least talked to. But it's always a thrill, a little bit of like, ooh, you got a little bit of acknowledgement. The problem with, Michael Biehn's characters, there are many problems with his character, but, at the end of the day, he's a narcissist.
Right.
He is, he's having problems in the record store. He feels that his love to Lauren Bacall, like, she will love me, whatever. And it's really interesting. Again, we're jumping off a little bit, but another movie came out a year afterwards called The Seduction, with Andrew Stevens and Morgan Fairchild. I don't know if you've heard of that one. Okay, it's another movie that'll make you gay. But it is basically a younger, sexier version of this, in which Andrew Stevens is obsessed with Morgan Fairchild, who's a news reporter. It's basically the same plot of The Fan. In fact, actually, you just reminded me that a couple of years ago, my friend Ruben and we had a stalkathon, and we watched The Fan and The Seduction back to back one night. It was pretty funny.
I love that. I mean, who wouldn't be obsessed with Morgan Fairchild in 1982?
Well,
I mean,
really funny,
yeah.
what's really funny in The Seduction is that Andrew Stevens is so hot in it that you don't understand why Morgan Fairchild doesn't
Just get together with him.
Keep this one as a kept man.
It doesn't make any sense.
That's too funny.
My one more. This can be a quick story, but my one Morgan Fairchild story. We were at a convention, and I was getting Tippi Hedren's autograph, and she was having a conversation in the booth over with Morgan Fairchild. So I fully interrupted Tippi Hedren deep in conversation with Morgan Fairchild of like, excuse me, Miss Hedren, like, can you please sign this headshot from the Birds
That I just paid $45
that I just
for.
paid like $20 for, and I was just talking to your assistant. So she fully like left a conversation with Morgan Fairchild and signed the photo with her like shaking arthritic hands. I kind of died.
It's funny because obviously Tippi Hedren has a gay following, and Morgan Fairchild has a gay following. So this is all within a world where it makes sense. And actually, in particular, Morgan Fairchild is very pro LGBTQ. She always has been, and she was doing it at the time in the 80s, especially fighting for AIDS rights. When not a lot of actresses or actors were sticking their heads out at that time.
Right.
So Morgan Fairchild, I don't think I could give her enough respect. I wish she had more notoriety now. I mean, she was really an 80s icon, and she's not really doing any like leading role type of things. But that's hysterical. I've yet to meet Tippi Hedren. Is she still alive?
I think
She's
she
still
is.
alive, and
she was lovely.
And I don't think the Shambhala Reserve is currently having guests there. So
Her wildlife reserve out in the valley. So that brings up another point. You know, this movie takes place in this world of New York theater, and so many of the kind of like interstitial characters. You know, I'm looking up the one character that gets slashed in the YMCA pool.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
that scene is insane.
That scene is insane, first of all.
So by the way, unfortunately, again, we just mentioned AIDS a moment. That guy died of AIDS in real life.
That's where I was going.
But again, it's another piece of the fan that makes the sum total of this film very gay.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it by intention and some of it by unintention. And even having that actor in that role playing in that, and he ended up being gay, and unfortunately he ended up passing away because of AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
It's another, like, you can't put your finger on it, but this film is so gay.
Yeah.
We were just talking about on a few episodes ago of just when you see random actors of movies of this time and you sort of go on a Google rabbit hole and then you find out that they died of AIDS. It's just, and it's always a very specific type
or anytime
of actor.
Anytime it's a movie from the early 80s and you see that they passed away in the 80s and they were young, you're just like, oh, okay.
Well, there's a guy from Friday the 13th Part 2.
In the wheelchair.
Mark, who's the guy who gets it in the wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
My mind was blown, first of all, when I learned that he was gay.
Yeah.
I was like, oh. And by the way, there are two gay men in that film, two camp counselors. So Friday the 13th Part 2 is one of my favorites. Also, Friday the 13th Part 2 came out 1 week or 2 weeks before the fan.
Oh,
this
wow.
time. But yes, he unfortunately passed away, and it was like, oh man, and for the same reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah. That pool scene. Again, I love the fact that your podcast is called The Movies That Made Me Gay. Let me just tell you just one little story, and then we'll go back in. And I'm sorry for monopolizing too much time.
No.
When I saw this film, this was on. I lived in Vermont at the time, and I was a teenager, maybe 15 or something, and this was on late night out of a Canadian Montreal channel called Channel 12, and they would show their movies unedited. Ooh. And for me, we didn't have cable. This was like cable. So The Fan came on, and I saw it in the TV guide, and I circled it, and I didn't know anything about this movie. And I watched it like on a weeknight in the middle of the night. I had to wake myself up at 1 o'clock in the morning to watch. That's the only way. Like, that's just how you did it back then. And this movie played on, and I liked the score, and I could tell it was very Dressed to Kill. And then the rooftop scene came in. So for those of you who haven't watched the film, sorry, we're going to spoil it here a little bit, but most people probably coming in listening to it has probably heard of the fan.
Yeah.
The scene in which a guy is seduced on the roof by Michael Biehn for nefarious reasons. It doesn't end well for the gay man and at all. It's actually pretty grotesque. But before that, the scene is so sexually charged. And there's a blowjob that's involved. And as a teenager, oh my God, it was instantly turned on. And I was like, whoa, because I'd never seen anything like that. There was only one other movie called Making Love, which was a drama from 1982. That showed up on the same Channel 12. So thank you, Channel 12 programming for whoever. But though that had a kiss scene between Harry Hamlin and Michael Biehn, those two scenes from The Fan and Making Love just talk about like I'm like, okay, I'm gay.
Eye-opening, yeah.
And especially how that scene opens with Michael Biehn walking into the gay bar, that you just kind of instantly know, oh, this isn't like a regular bar. This is one of those bars.
Well, and also it's interesting that that scene actually happens in the book, where a gay man is set up to be killed, and Michael Biehn uses him as a decoy, basically. But in the movie, it really speaks to, and Michael Biehn says it in the interview as well. And that's where it's kind of said that Michael Biehn's character in this film is a closet case.
Right.
Yeah.
There is something going on here. And that's one of the things that I talked to Michael about outside of this interview, was that one of the reasons where you're viewed as a closet case in this film is that you are so intent on being sexually charged with this old actress. Just doesn't make any sense. You're a young, good-looking guy.
Yeah.
Not saying that good-looking guys can't go for older women, but in this case, she's pretty grandma-ish.
Yeah.
And it's pretty weird. And then he thinks to go to a gay bar. He could have picked up, I don't know, he could have gone anywhere,
but
he thought to go there. And in the rooftop scene, the guy does go down on him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like he just didn't almost get there. He gets there.
Oh, totally.
You're like, whoa. What's
and especially for a movie with a major American movie star, that a studio was just like, sure, keep it in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, like I said, it was just all you had to do was see the hands up. You knew what the guy was doing, but I had never seen anything like that before. And I was like, and I guarantee you, when the fan showed again on that channel, I was going to stop watching this film. But not a film I could rent and show my friends, or anything like that, because of that scene in particular. It'd be hard for me to justify that with like watching it with my dad or friends. But
I love that his idea is, okay, I'm going to fake a suicide. I'm going to find somebody about my, build. But the only way that I can fake the suicide to make it believable is we got to burn up the body, right? So not only do I slash my own throat, but I then cover myself in gasoline and light my dying body ablaze.
with jokes aside, it's a pretty ugly scene.
It is. Yeah. It's rough.
It's a very, I'll say, homophobic scene for its time. And this was after Cruising came out, and Cruising had already been, ripped up a new asshole, no pun intended, of being like homophobic and of course the gay community, and myself included, as I have a Cruising poster.
I was going to say, you have a Cruising poster behind you.
Has embraced Cruising, but for that time, that kill scene in The Fan just seemed a little like, aren't we past it?
Right.
And a movie called The Celluloid Closet, which talks about all gay and lesbian films from the very beginning all the way up to now, and sort of the code ones and whatever. But they specifically brought out that film and a movie called Windows, about lesbians, of like, this is the uglier side of gay and lesbian. You could not, here's the thing, you could not have Dressed to Kill or Cruising, or I think you might be able to get away with that scene with the fan now, but I don't think you could have some of the other movies I just mentioned come out the way that they did. They'd be insensitive.
Definitely.
They were back then.
Yeah.
Shout out to our Cruising episode.
Yeah,
with Mike Toscano.
covered Cruising with Mike.
That was a fun one to talk about.
I'm sure it is. Cruising is just, you can never, I mean, God knows how many times I've seen that film. And I've appreciated it more and more and more. But when I rented that one on video when I was like a senior in high school or whatever, I didn't quite get it. It just seemed a little ugly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my thing. And now over the years, talk about getting reevaluated. You look at this and you're like, wow, this is a gay slasher film.
It's a time capsule of New York of the late 70s.
Total time capsule of sexual, like, go for broke, which didn't, really, stopped right when AIDS came in.
Mm-hmm.
You had the director of The Exorcist, Al Pacino. Like, you just had a few things going on in that film. But no, The Fan is no Cruising. And it wasn't a hit. I wouldn't say Cruising was a hit, but Cruising made a lot more money than The Fan,
right?
And Dressed to Kill for a couple of reasons.
So it's probably not the intention of the line, but I did think it was very interesting when Lauren Bacall tells, I don't know if she's telling James Garner, when she's just very upset. And she said, I've got a fruitcake fan obsessed with me. And she doesn't mean fruit.
Best line.
Yeah. And I mean, she doesn't mean that he's like a fruit, like he's fruity, but just now when you hear it, you're just like, well, yeah.
Well, like I said, the author of the film was gay.
Mm-hmm.
The producer of this film was gay. You probably go behind the scenes of, some of the crew, not saying so much of the cast, because we know that the cast wasn't.
Right.
But like, there was all this like circulating behind the scenes kind of stuff where I feel like at one point, is it intentional, non-intentional, unintentional? It's hard to tell, which makes it a fascinating film to me. Mm-hmm. Of like, where did it all go wrong and happen? And I was surprised. I got to be honest. When we did the Blu-ray and we got the director and we got the editor, Michael Biehn was a surprise. I didn't know if he was going to talk about it, and it had more budget. I would have loved to have gone to the composer and a few other people just to go whatever, but we always have to keep things in it. I was surprised that they were able to talk about The Fan and candidly, and that Paramount, who we sublicensed the film from, didn't object to our commentary and our extras. That in itself was a hurdle that I didn't know if we were going to get past, because, Lauren isn't mentioned so flattering. Right. In these interviews.
I think that there's some powerful gay men at Paramount that sort of gave you the backdoor entrance with that one. No pun intended.
Right. Some of the campier elements in this scene for me revolve around Lauren's singing.
Oh my God. We have to talk about this fucking musical. I have so many questions about what the story is of this musical.
Never say never.
But that said, I would pay $100 to see this at like the Pantages this week.
I've shown this film over the years to several people, virgin viewers of the thing. And when we get into the music territories, they're flabbergasted because they just don't understand. There's this guy running around in cabaret doing In Paris, like what's going on. There's a couple of women dancing that she's a remarkable woman. She's also lying in bed that, hot love baby tonight. Nothing seems to make any sense in this music.
Has Lauren just had a kinky three-way with all of these men? I don't know.
Yeah, and that number comes out of nowhere. It just doesn't make any sense.
I also love in the earlier rehearsal scenes when she's doing the choreography.
Love the rehearsal scenes.
She's getting the choreography down, and there's maybe one line that's sung. And, Lauren Bacall is talk singing. She's Henry Higgins talk singing the entire time. And even during the rehearsal, it's only one line, but it's still, you can still kind of hear that it was looped, that she probably pre-recorded it and then lip synced it in the shot. I'm like, she's talk singing. Why can't she just do that on set? But it's that Lauren Bacall delivery that's just it's the voice and the diction and all of that.
That look on Lauren Bacall's face right before she performs that number in rehearsal of that, all right, are you ready? Let's go.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack in the musical stuff. I think that the film the song "Heart's Not Diamond" got nominated for a Razzie, as it should have, because it's actually probably not a bad song, but the way that she sings it with this, sitting on a podium, sitting on a seat in front of the audience, smoking a cigarette, and her voice just does not live up to it. So, like, she just should not have been a solo singer in that moment.
Some hearts and diamonds start running through my mind. Diamonds seem to cling to me. Hearts get left behind. I always chased those diamonds, hoping I would shine. Hearts were not my strongest suit, so you were never mine.
And I'm wondering about the Broadway that she was doing at the time. Probably not musicals, I would imagine.
No, she was. That's the whole thing. She was doing something called Applause, and she was, she was doing the Broadway stuff. She was singing, but I don't know. It just there's something about maybe, and this happens all the time. When you see a musical and you go to Broadway or you go to a play, there's a different energy that comes out there.
Right.
It's very hard to translate that sometimes to actual film. And in this case, Lauren Bacall probably did much better in person in Broadway.
Sure.
Taking her talent and going to taking this to film. It's funny, the whole musical of the Fam reminds me of the opening of Death Becomes Her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Completely. Just
the sweet chariot of youth.
Sweet bird of youth.
Sweet bird of youth, yeah.
Songbird.
Yeah, it's so. Every time I see the opening of Death Becomes Her, I'm like, I wonder if they watched the Fan, because it's just so. Lauren Bacall is very Madeline
Ashton.
Madeline Ashton,
Absolutely, just sitting on the bed, like I thought the exact same thing when I was watching it. Yeah, that stuff is iconic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I the funny thing is Michael Biehn, and he says it a little bit in the interview, but afterwards he would be like, "Hearts and diamond." He told me that his agent at the time, I wish I remembered his name, but he was also gay, for years afterwards would just cackle and howl about Hearts and Diamonds with Michael Biehn.
Lots of hearts and diamonds.
Thought that was just such a ridiculous scene in the film, and I can only imagine it. It's too bad. Going back to Michael Biehn. When this movie came out and it didn't do very well, his agent was kind of honest with him and said, this isn't going to do what it's going to do. But he is probably the most, him and probably Maureen Stapleton, as far as the actors are concerned, they're the ones who hit their beats probably the best.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's
come
really good
away
in it.
From it scathed. Whereas Lauren Bacall, God love you wherever you are, James Garner completely phoning it in. This was really kind of like a sort of a throwaway for them. But Michael Biehn does a really good job. And what did not make the Blu-ray, which I was very upset about when I learned afterwards because we interviewed it, is that James Cameron saw the Fan and cast Michael Biehn in the Terminator because he thought he had an intensity and something that was there that he saw in the Fan.
Wow. I love that.
I know. That's why I was upset when it didn't make it on the Blu-ray. I was like, went to my editors. I was like, they're cutting this and it was on there. Why'd you take it off? Oh, I don't know what happened. I'm like, Okay,
wow.
well, that's pretty good.
And
good thing.
Michael Bihn's had a working relationship with Jim Cameron that's lasted decades.
Yeah.
Too. He's very loyal to his actors.
That Michael, told me, I could pick up the phone and talk to James at any time, and he really could. But, you think of Michael Bihn's career in Tombstone and The Abyss and Aliens and Terminator and all these iconic films, and he's also enjoyed the party life, Mr. Biehn, for some time, whenever. But again, I'm still so in awe that I was able to have not one, but two conversations about the fan with him. All right, this is something I've never told anybody. So when I met Michael Biehn the first time, it was when we went to his place to interview him for a film he did called The Seventh Sign with Demi Moore.
I remember The Seventh Sign. I loved that movie.
End of the world type of stuff. And he plays Demi Moore's husband in it. And he agreed to do an interview. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, I'm making sure that I'm going to see Michael Biehn and I'm going to try to bring in the fan and see how he reacts.
Love it.
And at that time, we didn't have the fan. So we went in and went to his place and whatever. And then I said, I have to let you know, I'm the marketing manager, blah, 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 blah. I don't normally come to these things, but I'm a huge fan of a film that you did called The Fan. And he looked at me and he said, can I ask you a question?
Can I ask you a personal question?
Exactly. And I said, yes. He said, are you gay? And I said, absolutely. And he just laughed. And from there on, totally relaxed, joked with me, laughed with me. And probably one of the best moments was me sitting outside with him, on his picnic table, and just going through all of the areas of The Fan that make this film a cult classic with gay men.
Yeah.
And he was laughing and joking. He said something that he didn't say on camera. He said that he had a lot of respect for the gay community because we fight when things are, we don't just, when we're tired of being bullied, being pushed upon, we actually fight back. And he said he has a lot of respect for that. So anybody who's listening to that, just know that, I wouldn't say that Michael Biehn would, be at your local gay pride parade anytime. But he had an understanding, and he's also been in the business. How could you not be in the business for all those years and not have gay hairdressers or crew? I'm sorry, not to stereotype, but makeup and that stuff, and casting agents and directors and all sorts of people. So
absolutely. That's really cool. That's great to hear too, because
what a wild experience for him, because he had just done TV, some small movies. And I mean, he's from probably rural Texas or something. I'm not sure where he's from.
It was from, I think it was either, oh God, I want to say Arizona. Maybe,
somewhere in the Southwest.
Someplace small. And he got plucked.
He lands this lead opposite Lauren Bacall. Yeah. And just how intimidating that would have been. He talks about on the Blu-ray first meeting her and bringing her flowers, and she was having a conversation, probably smoking with James Garner, and she just walks over, takes the flowers, gives them to an assistant, and just walks away, and doesn't even say anything to him.
To me, I was surprised that Paramount allowed us to keep that in.
Yeah.
I love that shit, though.
Lauren Bacall is not, with us anymore. And I can see that happening. And I'm sure that was completely offensive. But as he said in the interview, he was in his early 20s. He didn't know.
Yeah.
And he's this seasoned person and, probably liked it. But, yeah, not a good way of keeping your like a new actor, who's all excited and whatever, and then you get that. I mean, that's a crush. A crushing blow for sure.
Yeah. Kind of going back to a little bit of his character and kind of being a closet case. I love his scenes in the record store with Dana Delaney.
Oh yes.
Just how he just hates this bitch. Like, he's just like, get the hell out of here.
This queen is over it.
Yeah.
And she's cute. She's like really cute. She's dressed all hip. She's like kind of punk, you know, and she likes him. She comes up and she's super friendly. She's just, you know, she's just a coworker that she's, you know, she's not being a bitch to him. She's not like putting him down or rejecting him. It's not that thing of he's been emasculated by other women or, you know, anything like that. He just doesn't like her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't like her. And there's another scene, of course, when his sister
Mm-hmm.
comes to the door. And, you know, she's like, you know, basically, you know, you're living in a fantasy world. But for a lot of gay men, that's another scene that strikes home because there's an God, I can't say this today. There's a removal from the family that a lot of men go through. Like, let me live in my own space. You don't understand me. You know, I'm being quiet because of whatever. There's, again, another layer there. His interaction with women in the film, not so good.
Yeah.
The maid, Maureen Stapleton, the other maid who gets slashed in the bedroom, even the other throwaway stagehand woman at the end of the film who he gets rid of.
Yeah.
There's stuff going on there. I'm like thinking about it in my head. I was like, no.
I mean, the end of the movie just goes off the rails. The ticket taker guy and like the cleaning lady in the theater, like they didn't do anything. That's just, you know, that's just crazy.
It was at that point. So what I've been told is that the ending was definitely reshot after Dress to Kill and Friday the 13th were big hits. Robert Stigwood, big producer, Grease, you know, was like, okay, we need to Dress to Kill this all up. Like we need more slashing. We need whatever. Apparently, so in the beginning of the film where the fan takes the pen away from Lauren Bacall and Michael Biehn takes it. Originally, the ending of the film is that Lauren Bacall would have stabbed him with the pen, which would have.
I thought it was going to go that direction when I saw. The pen was so heavily featured.
Yes, and James Garner also comes in at the end of the film on the original ending and saves the day or something like that or whatever. There's a few things that are going on. But in the ending that is now the permanent ending, you know, there's a razor, you know, a knife.
A knife,
you know,
yeah.
Knife, not even a razor at this point. And, you know, gory blood gushing out of a neck and all sorts of stuff. But yes, two other innocent people just get biting the dust pretty quickly. It's, again, that's why it's this weird slasher film. There are slasher fans that will begrudgingly put this film into the slasher camp because it doesn't fit the Friday the 13th and the Halloween thing. But it is a slasher film because many people are slashed into it, but it isn't a typical one. It's also not your typical psychological thriller. It's again, just why I love this film so much because it brings up I'm always just kind of sitting there going like, the intentions were good because nobody makes a movie with the intention of making it bad. Sure, there can be some, you know, horror comedies out there or whatever. Like people are like, well, we're going to make it so bad it's good. You can't really do that. Everybody goes in wanting to make a good movie. So a lot of budget and time and effort and energy went into the fan. And then...
there was a lot of talent involved in this movie. Like you mentioned, the producer... the cinematographer too. I mean, Dick Bush has shot a lot of big movies.
Jaws.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like, you know, even just the writer of Hearts and Diamonds. I gotta look at my poster. Hamlish and I should
Tim Rice.
With my hand.
And Tim Rice was the lyricist for The Lion King, I think.
Yep. Marvin Hamlish, the music. Actually, I even found out that the executive producer, which is Kevin McCormick, I believe somebody told me either off record, maybe it's on record, that he had a relationship with Robert Stigwood. So again, men behind the scenes, you know, that were gay, that were not publicly out, you know, playing a role in this film.
Yeah. I think, Michael Biehn obviously, but I think like for me, Maureen Stapleton is really like a shining star in this.
This was
movie.
the year that she won her Oscar too. This is the year that Reds came out.
Yep. Yeah, she doesn't get enough credit in this film, and meaning that she's pretty. Her scene again, it is a campy scene where she's telling off Lauren Bacall, and she's like, "What is this bliss shit? I'm a letter writing mop, floor mop, whatever." She goes into this thing, and you're fascinated by her at that moment.
You don't even know your fans. I'm the one that has to put up with him. He's the one that's gone too far. He wants to be your lover, for Christ's sake. What was I supposed to do? Give him an appointment?
You were supposed to handle it. Firmly, but nicely. That's your job.
Did it ever occur to you that my job isn't exactly heaven?
Neither is mine. Whoever told you that life was supposed to be uninterrupted bliss?
What is this bliss shit? I'm a Secret Service escort, a butler, nurse, letter-writing machine, floor mop. I got a phone growing out of one ear and a big fake smile on my face. 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Hello.
And, she plays her character really well. So the time where she's attacked in the subway, you actually feel it.
Oh, yes.
Again, a brutal scene because she's a likable character, but you also know that there's unavoidable that she was, going to be, that she was going to cross paths with the fan. Mm-hmm. But it's really a kind of a scene. But that subway scene is, again, right out of Dressed to Kill.
I think that I said that out loud when we were watching it the first time that we had watched it last night. I think I actually just said Dressed to Kill out loud when it was that sort of that tracking shot of him catching up to her in the subway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that music is very Jaws.
Yes.
Dun, 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 dun. It's almost, again, comical, but it's not. But I remember, again, watching it for the first time when I was a kid, and I was terrified for her. I was like, oh my God, here's this psychopath.
Yeah. Another thing that I had to stop and go back when it's early on in the movie and it's established that it's Lauren Bacall's character's birthday.
Oh,
and
her age.
So much is made of like, you're 49, but 47, 45. And it's like, wait, what? How old is she supposed to be? And then I'm assuming it was supposed to be her 50th birthday because later on she says, I'm 50 years old and I'm opening a show on Broadway.
And I looked up that Lauren Bacall was 57 when she made this movie.
Of course she was.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Wink.
There's no way that she was going to be 49.
No.
That's so ridiculous. But again, probably part of the script. I mean, again, you never know what vanity or an ego. I mean, the thing that always fascinates me about movies, and I've been in the business for a while and I've seen a lot of behind the scenes shenanigans, is people don't realize sometimes of those kind of like egos and personality, things like that go into every process. And stars like Lauren Bacall, she would have a fit. She did not like that the original director was replaced. I think I don't know if you saw the interview, but she kept calling the director Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, because he was a commercial director, and she took that kind of personal that I'm a huge movie star and I'm being directed by someone that has shot Dr. Pepper commercials. And also just Lauren Bacall has been famous since she was like, I mean, how old was she when she was discovered? 17, 18 years old. So she's been in the spotlight for almost her entire life.
Yeah. Yeah. She just, again, but at the same token too, if Lauren Bacall wasn't her, I'm going to give her this credit, and she didn't behave the way that she did, and Michael Biehn and the director and the editor didn't have the stories that they had, and she wasn't Lauren Bacall, we might not be talking about this.
It wouldn't be as good.
True.
You know what I mean? Like on some levels, it's kind of like, it's kind of like when we talk about Faye Dunaway and Mommy Dearest. It's like, it's not just that she did a role that was so over the top. It's also her real life reputation that adds fuel to the fire and the reputation of Mommy Dearest, which, by the way, Al, you mentioned it in the earlier part of the call. I love the fact that there was a time in 1981 where Paramount's PR team was working on both
pretty close
and Mommy Dearest.
Both 81.
They had to have crossover there. They were
Oh,
also
yeah.
working on Friday the 13th Part 2 and My Bloody Valentine, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But certainly some campiness going on.
It's just kind of funny that like we just talked last week with Jackson about Mommy Dearest, and it wasn't even intended that we would follow it up with The Fan, but it just kind of worked out.
Yeah. Again, I'm glad that The Fan, it's funny. One of you said that this is it's a cult following and it's a niche cult following.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure how much more it'll ever break out other than just, but you guys didn't know about it until recently.
Yeah.
And so that's a good thing. That means it'll continue sort of a little bit of its path. It'll never be a Mommy Dearest
Right.
or a Valley of the Dolls or a Showgirls, a real bona fide, huge Baby Jane gay classic. But if you go down a little bit more, I think that this film just will have its continued legs. I was just thrilled to be able to put this out on Blu-ray and in a sense preserve it. Because yes, you can rent it on streaming, but it doesn't have the extras, doesn't have the content, and it looks better on Blu-ray, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just never get tired of this film.
Yeah, absolutely. It does look better on Blu-ray. That kind of reminded me of, we talk about this a lot on the podcast, watching high definition movies from, the 70s and the 80s. Sometimes things show up that didn't quite, weren't intended to show up.
You can really read at the end of this movie the makeup on Michael Bihn's jab to the head.
The slight when she whips him and there's the scar that's right there. It's like looks like you could peel it away.
Yeah, that was never meant for HD.
Maureen Stapleton's scars too from her slashing are a little crazy, but
Maureen Stapleton, the all hell in the hospital, looking like
oh man,
it's so embarrassing.
The hospital scenes are pretty rough.
You know who's also, by the way, who I didn't mention this much on the Blu-ray, and maybe we mentioned a little bit on the commentary, but when I watched it again recently, because I have watched it since we put it out on Blu-ray a couple of times, because I just go there.
Yeah.
Hector Elizondo is, again, good, plays his role, doesn't overshadow, plays it understated, plays that same character that he played in Pretty Woman.
Yep.
They just that same kind of nice, calming, basically, what is it? The straight man. Like he doesn't have to bring it up because the other actors are already up here. And also Michael Biehn, going back to him, I'm just thinking about the performances. Michael Biehn doesn't really have to act until the final end of the film. All of his scenes are face. That one scene in the record store. But of it is just being upset or swimming in a pool, killing somebody or whatever, or typing letters, and it's voiceovers.
Yeah.
He really doesn't have to do much speaking in the film. It's a lot kind of stuff. So I give him a lot of credit. He's just using most of his face. Throughout the whole film, registering.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting. I didn't think about that, but it is a lot of voiceover. I love also, you mentioned Hector Elizondo, but I also do want to give a shout out to Anna Marie Horsford from Amen.
Yes. Okay. So it's funny because she's in it before Amen was a hit show on NBC on Saturday nights, which do you remember that block from the 80s?
Amen on Saturday. Was it with Golden Girls?
Golden Girls, that's one.
Yeah. Golden Girls, Amen. Well, at some point there was the Richard Mulligan spin-off, Empty Nests.
We don't like to talk about Empty Nests.
Christy McNichol. I'll give Christy McNichol and
I never liked Empty Nests.
And Marty from Grease.
But there were two other shows before Empty Nests or that came on. Do you remember them?
And the Golden Girls and Amen. Let's see. Gosh, I can't.
I'll fill you.
I can't think of it.
Facts of Life.
Sure, that tracks.
They moved to Saturdays at some point.
Okay.
And 227.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, 227 would be the same night as Amen.
So it's so funny we're mentioning this because I literally was just talking about this with a friend of mine a couple of other days ago. Is that as teenagers in the 80s, if you didn't have cable and you were bored on a Saturday night, that's what you watched were those pockets of shows.
That's a block,
and you went to Saturday Night Live.
That is a good block of like lady comedy.
That's your entire evening right there.
Yeah. I mean, that is what you just did because you were bored and you didn't have anything else to watch. And CBS and ABC on Saturdays it wasn't cutting.
No. I mean, that is must see TV. Oh my god.
I think it's wild that just the idea of a successful sitcom, a Saturday night block. Like, that's so inconceivable now that I don't even know what's on ABC at like 7 o'clock now.
It just
on a Saturday.
Like I said, it sort of kind of worked, and it's amazing that again, Golden Girls and 227 and The Facts of Life have gay followings. Amen, not so much. But the other, sure. And Empty Nest does have the Christy McNichol factor, even though I didn't like that show. But yes, but she's in it, and she's a cop. The other thing too is I love again all of the gay extra dancers, and the lead one kind of has a Sandy Duncan vibe, who is like like. Showing all the moves, and he's the one that's in Paris and whatever like that. I'm like, okay, you couldn't have gotten a more Nellier.
In those bold shots of those dancers in that rehearsal.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so. Again, I can imagine New York Broadway, like that's just kind of how it was. It reminded me a little bit of Fame.
Sure.
Fame had came out like right before that. Another New York film. Gritty, but not as well. Now there's some pretty bad, dangerous.
Yeah.
Fame as well.
J. Coco.
Oh yes, poor Coco and her cakes.
Yeah. That as a kid watching anything like that fascinated me when there was a show production dance and you would see male dancers in a rehearsal situation. To me, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is what is going on. Watch it. We talk a lot about Outrageous Fortune on this show.
The dance rehearsal scenes that open up Outrageous Fortune.
She's a ballet dancer, and there's like all these men, and in that movie, one of them is gay, and
one of them's gay,
she
and
calls it out,
is going straight for method. I love that.
Yeah, so anytime as a kid I got to see like male dancers, ballerinas, like in rehearsal outfits, I was just like, all right, this movie's for me.
Well, for us it was solid gold.
Oh yes.
I mean, every time the male dancers came on, I think even my brothers and I would all go gay, like because I was just so obvious.
Yeah,
but the 80s, it's interesting. The 80s produced so many gay things. I'm talking Madonna. I'm talking Mommy Dearest. I'm talking Boy George. I'm talking about the music. I'm talking about fashion. I'm talking about dynasty. I'm talking about so many things, and yet it was also such a homophobic decade.
Yeah.
Interesting, and scenes like The Fan and Cruising and some of that kind of stuff reflected it. But it's interesting, after Cruising and Dressed to Kill and whatever, there was this long spell of basically invisibility of gay men in any movies. You didn't have you had some supporting characters in Big Business, or a throwaway characters, but a lot of it was that kind of Bronson Pinchot, in Beverly Hills Cop, super over the top stuff, and it was not. It just was I'm so glad that things have changed for us for the better. I actually think now you could have a gay slasher film, or you could have gay villains, and it would not be a big deal. In fact, we have seen them.
Right.
We have seen them. But back then, it was just a different time. And I've asked myself this. I was a teenager, high school. I wasn't an out gay man at the time in the 80s. Had I lived in New York, would I have protested something like Cruising? Yeah, probably. Absolutely. If I was an out gay man and I was looking for, equal rights and whatever like that, yeah, of course I'd be offended. I just think it's ironic that The Fan and Cruising and Dressed to Kill in particular are films that are now really sort of like gay men are like, well, these were our films.
We've taken them back.
Like don't appropriate them other people. Like this is our history. This is our stuff. And it is. And as ugly as some of the moments are in those films, well, they did sort of raise conversation. Same thing with Basic Instinct. You know, there was a lot of stuff in that in the early 90s. And so, you know, The Fan is small in comparison, but we're still talking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that we kind of addressed the situation with the character on the rooftop and, you know, the brutality of that, because on the one hand, it is something that, you know, if he is, you know, a closeted gay character or something like that, but what he does do to him is rough, you know, and I was just thinking as I'm watching it, I'm just like, oh my God, like that's going to have some blowback. Like people are going to have feelings about this. That couldn't be done today.
And also just kind of the weird plot holes of this movie, which we can forgive now just because it's a crazy movie of the plot holes of that. He's just getting away with all of this. Like he's just like openly murdering people in the pool at the YMCA or just sneaking into Lauren Bacall's house and he just gets away with it.
Yeah. The pool scene is very funny because it's kind of like, well, it's a pretty vicious scene. But he just swims away and no one says like, stop, what happened?
Yeah.
Whatever.
I mean, for the middle of the day at the YMCA, this place is like lit.
Again, the YMCA, another unintended.
Gay hallmark.
Like it was pretty like, you know, it's just the whole thing.
And just like another moment, I think that he's on the phone with Lauren Bacall. And then there's there's just this album of Donna Summer.
Oh,
yeah. Summer in the back.
Yes, he's in the record store about to do his speech to the boss.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. He's like psyching himself out like Travis Bickle style.
Yeah, and then there's another scene where he's sitting in the park after being rejected, and he's like, "Do you think that your secretary might have lesbian tendencies?" Again, another example of just like, okay, how many gay themes? It's kind of like a movie that was also set in New York, which was The Village People's ridiculous "Can't Stop the Music," which came out before.
Oh, we'll get to that movie eventually.
Well, we did put it out on Blu-ray and did it justice, and I did produce that one. I have to say that because I love the fact that I have in my canon some of these like, gay films that are like, yes, I put them out. But Can't Stop the Music is another film where it's like so obvious gay throughout the whole movie, and yet no one says the word gay.
Yep.
Like, and that's where the fan plays into that role. It's kind of like, yes, it's meant for mainstream, but not really. All the codes are there, all the sensibilities are there, and that's why we're talking about it on a podcast of like movies that made me gay. And I gotta be honest, when I announced it, that title was coming through a batch of. So every year at Scream Factory, we usually announce a whole bunch of titles at Comic-Con and get everybody really excited about them. And The Fan was one of 22 films. Every time I saw someone got really excited about The Fan, I kind of looked at their profile like,
called it.
That checks out.
Playing for the team.
That's funny. That's awesome.
I mean, I'm sure that there's weirdo straight fans that are into this movie.
Of course there are. Well, they're Michael Biehn fans out there. And there are certainly fans of slasher films that just are completists and they want all slasher films.
Sure.
And I get it. And there's probably if they're fans of Lauren Bacall and they're men, they're probably gay.
Yeah.
It's going to throw that out there. But I would say that the percentage is probably 90% to 10.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 80-20. Yeah. That's being generous.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I mean, to be fair, a straight friend of ours, when I put this on my Instagram story from the Letterbox cover, he did reply to my story and just said, "Oh, wow, that's really hard to get a hold of."
So he was aware of it.
So he was aware of it.
Well, there you go. But yeah, we're so glad that it's available now, you know, on Blu-ray. And I mean, we're lucky enough to have a local store, like brick and mortar store that we can go to and rented it.
Videotech in South Pasadena.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's nice.
Have you ever been to Videotech in South Pasadena?
yeah.
Is that where you rented it?
Yeah. Have you ever been there? Because I know that you're somewhat local. Oh, yeah. You should have an afternoon and go to Videotech in South Pasadena, and you can go walk by the Michael Myers house.
Oh, well,
You can go see Andy's house from Pretty in Pink. It's just down the street.
Mama's family's house is down there too.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it is. I have a picture in front of it. But yeah, I mean, I think we're in this age now where people, I said it in last week's episode, if it's not streaming on Netflix, or Prime, people are just like, well, then I'm not going to watch it. But
yeah, well, I mean, again, the fan is available to rent. You guys can, go on iTunes or go on Amazon, but you got to pay money for it. I would argue that, if you're a fan of this film, I think we did it right. The commentary, as you listen to, the best. I will say that the commentary is the only commentary I will ever do. And people are like, why? We thought it was a blast. You would probably be fun on some other ones. I'm like, I only wanted to do it on the fan. I could speak to that film. I also knew that the guys that I was with on that commentary, David Duvall and David Dakota, were established gay men who had their own followings and who had their own respect. And between the three of us all being fans of that film, we turned it into, as you listen to bits of it, sort of a Rocky, not a Rocky horror, but a bit of we camped it up.
Yeah.
We took the seriousness out of the interviews with the cast and crew, and then we applied okay, well, here's the real deal.
Yeah.
Here's all the information, but let's sing these bad songs and let's laugh at all the camp, and let's also, look at how hot Michael Biehn is when he's taking his shirt off.
Yeah.
So. And I'm glad that that's there permanently.
Yeah, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
We love that. We're always here for camping it up. When I saw that it was David Dakota and it was that, I was just like,
because
oh
we're
my
only
goodness.
familiar with him from his is it the 1313 movies?
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a lot of homoerotic kind of stuff.
just a little.
And he knew what he was doing. But when I met him years ago through David Del Val and we all got talking about the fan, it was like, okay, well, that's great. But these are also the same kind of guys that like Eyes of Laura Mars and The Lonely Lady and, these kind of, The Bitch with Joan Collins.
The Bitch.
The Bitch. Love that one.
There's certain movies from that time period that were like, again, either coded or outright gay or whatever. And they were great. And you could tell that we were all having a good time with this film.
Yeah.
And I've gotten some really good. Mike Toscano is a good example of that. Hence, that's why I'm on this interview. Is that people were having a blast with the commentary, and that's great. But I did not expect to be talking about it years later because kind of when those things are done, I promote it and then I'm like moving on because just because. I don't like being one of those people who be like, oh, look what I did 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I've told myself I never want to be a baby Jane at the end of the day. Too many people who do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this a little bit on the Our Mommy Dearest episode, and you brought up the idea of, or that Michael Biehn said that something that he admires about the gay community is how we're ready to stand up for, rights and things like that. But what we brought up in the Mommy Dearest episode is that movie is 40 years old this year. And a newer generation of queer people may not be as familiar with it. And how important is it for us to say, hey, you need to learn about these things. You need to be familiar with these, these tropes and these pieces of art that are just part of our combined identity. And I'm seeing also that younger people aren't, well, maybe in the past year, we've kind of gotten off of our collective asses and said, okay, we do need to stand up again and be as active and as militant as we need to be. And I think it took 2020 to bring the younger generation of queer people to say, okay, you know, maybe we are being kind of not forgotten about, but complacent, you know, and are just like, well, everything's fine. Homophobia doesn't exist anymore. You know, we're on TV and in movies, so let's just, you know, not.
It's not. And, you know, I mean, again, these films that we talk about, the older ones in particular, John Waters films are a great example. They're a rite of passage that you sort of kind of need to, like, if you really want to understand, like, gay identity, gay culture, gay pop culture, you know, you better know who Alexis Carrington is on Dynasty. You better know who RuPaul is. You don't have to watch them. You don't have to even like them, but at least know of them, because these people, characters, Elvira, whomever, these are icons that have been important to our formative growing, coming out experiences. And so these films, like, again, when I came out in the early 90s, late 80s, you know, I didn't know about John Waters films. I didn't know about that Wizard of Oz was so beloved by gay men. I didn't know, like, I'd only heard glimpses of Barbara Streisand and Judy Garland, which, by the way, I'm not really into those ladies myself personally, but I am into Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, so that's another story. But there are people pick and choose, and you have your different icons. And Britney Spears is probably a great example. Do you know how many gay fans she has? My God. She's now that generation of like there are gay men that will just be like, don't you ever say anything
on
about
the Free Britney, which is, I mean, I'm kind of that same age, but it's never something that I've really related to. But I can respect it though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just glad that podcasts like yourself are available. I love that social media, God, there's a lot of things to say about social media that are not so good. But the good thing about social media is that when I was growing up in the 80s and even coming out in the 90s, I didn't have any sort of forum like this before. It was the clubs, the bars, and he didn't have any sort of place to see like Instagram, where you could see a whole bunch of people being really cool, having fun, laughing, poking fun at themselves, and having a sense of like, oh, these are like-minded people. I mean, it's good for that. God knows what movies like Mommy Dearest and The Fan would have been like had social media existed.
Yeah,
right.
But I mean, but from what I was told, Mommy Dearest, God, when it came out, it's such a camp following that people were like starting to dress up in costume immediately in the cities, and that Joan Crawford, Faye Dunaway, pissed when Paramount's marketing department re-put out newspaper ads that said, "Mommy Dearest, no wire hangers, the biggest mother of them all," and had a little wire hanger dangling from the T. And I think that's hysterical that they did that, because they clearly were trying to go for an Oscar campaign before it, and they realized, oh, gee, everyone's laughing at this movie. Let's just let's have fun with it.
Yeah,
Faye Dunaway, that Faye Dunaway.
I mean,
you know what? I often think of, God, what would it have been like The Fan? Let's go back to that. What would The Fan have been like had Elizabeth Taylor taken this role?
Yep.
Or Anne Bancroft. I mean, Anne Bancroft, I could probably see her being similar to Lauren Bacall, just because they have a similar look. But the dynamic of Elizabeth Taylor in this role, oh my God.
Late 70s Liz too. Or like or late 70s, early 80s Liz too.
Yeah, it just would have been something else. I can't even imagine.
Which I don't even know what was Liz Taylor doing in the early 80s in terms of movies too.
She did a movie called The Mirror Cracked, but it was like an ensemble piece with some other people. But she really wasn't doing a whole lot at that time. And I don't know, it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
But I will say this, and David Dakota and I said this, after all is said and done, change one thing about The Fan, because then it wouldn't be the movie that I love.
Yeah.
It's a top 5. I know that sounds crazy, guys. It's a top 5 favorite of mine. And I don't totally grasp why, but I've done everything that I could to peel away all the layers to be like, okay, it's a slasher film. I like slasher films. It has gay camp. I like gay camp. It has 80s vibe. It has this. It has this. It has this. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just like movies and they hit you and you don't know the magic reason.
It checks off all of those boxes.
Huh?
I said it checks off all of those boxes of things that we love.
Boxes, but I'm going to full circle this. But the first box that was checked off was me watching that as a 15-year-old teenager.
Yeah.
Super turned on and going, oh my God, this is porn. And yet it was sad porn if you think about it now.
Yeah.
But it was still male-to-male physical contact, which you did not see in films at that time. And that started my love for this film. And I'm just kind of, I'll be honest, amused and totally thrown by the fact that this film has followed me for, I'm going to show my age, guys. I turn 50 next year. So this is continued for the time. I don't know why.
Well, it's a great movie to keep following you around your whole life.
Yeah.
But I mean, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
I thank you guys. I mean, again, I'm really honored to be asked of something like this, and I'm glad that you guys had been organically following my Instagram page.
Yeah.
Beforehand, so you knew, like, all right, well, let's see what this character's
Yeah,
like I
definitely.
mentioned, like, your Instagram count is a delight. Like, I love a good 80s male stripper, and that's probably like a good portion of your brand is posting
it's
like
funny. It's funny because you probably already know this. I had to split my account
Yeah.
into two recently because the Instagram censors are starting to crack down on everybody on content. So I moved my more strippery, more offensive-ish kind of content over there, and I still got a video pulled down as of yesterday for nudity or implied nudity or, a little bit too much. To be fair, I was pushing the line with a stripper that I put up, and I was like, let me see how far I'll go. But I do believe that somebody on my page probably reported it.
Sure, of course.
Which is
Lame.
really sad.
Yeah.
Because don't you have a life? Whoever's report, like, come on. Like, and why are you? And by the way, I think my page is pretty upfront. It's like, it literally says, come for the what the fuck, stay for the comments. That's what it says. So if you're offended by my page, then you shouldn't be on my page.
Get the hell out of here. Yeah.
people just love to be trolls. But I do like to think that like the Instagram headquarters has your photo and your profile on like their bulletin board of like accounts that you have to like
with red yarn
keep track of every day.
To me, honestly, I kind of feel it's flattering. I would really like to not have my account be yanked because that would be. I've put a lot of time into it, and I only started that account years ago when I broke up with a couple of relationships that didn't go south, and I was left with this void of like, I need to be creative, and then it just kind of took off and it went off in its own sort of spin. But even if they were taken down today, I'd be like, hey, I'd been able to do it. I met a lot of great people. Scenarios like this right now wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And or I would never have met Mike Toscano or half a dozen other people. And there's been some really good positive things that have come out of that page. And I just love the fact that I am able to go into my own weird brain, pick out the silly, stupid stuff that I think about or that I find on on YouTube or my own videos or whatever like that. And I just post them out there and you guys have a blast. Just can't ask for anything better than that.
Definitely. Well, why don't you tell our listeners how they can find you on Instagram? What are those handles?
Jeffrey Mixed, And then if you want to really go a little more hardcore, it's Jeffrey Mixed Part 2.
Yes, indeed. And don't report anything you see on there. You're going there for a reason. But thank you again so much for coming on.
This was a fun movie to talk about. I'm glad that we finally got to watch it, and we did go out and buy the Scream Factory edition of it for our first viewing.
Thank you.
I love all the Scream Factory stuff. We just got the Friday.
Yeah, we bought it.
We just got the Friday the 13th box set.
Oh my God,
it's so nice.
That was I'll tell you, when I co-founded the brand, I want to make very clear that I say the brand only because the company Shout Factory, of course, was created by other people.
Right.
But the Scream Factory silo, me and another person, Cliff McMillan, who was the producer on a lot of these Blu-rays, we're the ones who came up with the idea of that brand, and we never thought 570 plus movies later, and we're going on, next year will be our 10 years of doing Scream Factory, and we still have more Blu-rays to announce. We still have more films. We have more of these kind of hidden gems like The Fan that are coming, and it's fascinating because these are the movies I literally rented, watched. My mother told me not to watch. They pay my rent now. I mean, it's just kind of funny that it's turned into anything. So when I'm hearing directly from someone like yourself who said that you bought the Friday the 13th set, which was a lot of damn work.
People lost their damn minds when that set was announced on my Instagram feed.
I know. Well, we lost our damn minds putting it out there. Trust me, it was not an easy feat.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive.
But it's a legacy. It's at the end of the day, like that is the permanent stamp on Friday the 13th films, and we did it we did it well. There were some hiccups. My production team felt those, and whatever, but we've moved past them. But for me, I'm just going to say this, and I know that we're coming to a close here. Out of all the films that we've put out, the hundreds of films, yes, we've been lucky, and we've had the Halloween and Carrie's and Friday the 13th and Child's Play and the really big ones, The Thing. But I look out for and I get more excited sometimes for the smaller ones, like The Fan, like, I don't know, we just announced Eyes of a Stranger and He Knows You're Alone, and Michael Caine and The Hand. And these are films that I am more like, oh wow, we're putting out this film. I mean, like, yeah, it just and in some levels, we're preserving these films.
I was really excited a few years ago when I saw that you guys did Gus Van Sant's Psycho, because Pete and I are weird fans of that movie, and I was just really glad that movie just got this proper Blu-ray release. That I'm just like, the thought that was put into the Gus Van Sant Psycho was just for me.
Well, I'll tell you, that's good. I wouldn't say it sold all that great. And there were debates about whether or not we put them out, but we also put out 2, 3, 4, and that seemed natural because Universal wasn't going to give us Psycho. In fact, actually, it's interesting you mentioned the Psycho films because Universal wouldn't allow us to do collector's edition artwork on it because that property is so sensitive to them. And yet we have artwork that was already created for parts 2 and 3 that will never see the light of day, but other stories. There's always fun stuff behind the scenes. The Fan was a lot of work, but it was a labor of love for me, so it never felt like work. And I'm just glad that it's finding new homes, new generations, and I realize we're out of time.
Yes.
Probably talking your ear off too much.
Oh no, that's okay. We love it. This is all great. It's all gold. But thank you so much again. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Okay, so you stop recording?
I mean we got to wrap it up on our end.
Oh, okay, you're wrapping up. Okay, so do I say goodbye?
We'll go ahead and we'll do our goodbyes, sign off, and then we'll be good to go. We'll have some little sign off music and all that good stuff. But we'll just say we'd love to have you on again in the future for something else if everything lines up.
If everything goes according to plan in 2021 with vaccinations.
Yeah, well, I would love to meet you guys in person. I mean, that's the other thing, too, is that, this whole COVID thing and being locked in, we're all making things work the way that it is. And movies help pass the time. and stuff, but it is not the same as social interaction and in person. And I wasn't really a club person, but I'm tired of wearing my masks and not being able to, double take somebody because everybody looks cute with a mask on. And some people, anyways.
Right.
But well, thank you guys, and thanks for making my Sunday a lot more pleasant. I was looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Until we speak again, goodbye.
Bye.
And thank you so much, everybody. This was another fun one.
Love this episode.
Love
Jeff
the
was a lot of fun to talk
fan.
to.
We will post images of our Shout Factory Blu-ray of Scream Factory Blu-ray of The Fan. This wonderful, wonderful movie. But I think it's that time to say hello and give a shout out to all of our wonderful patrons.
Shout outs.
Yes, indeed. We want to say hi to Paul, Jamie, Drew, Jimmy, Genevieve, Dawn, Josh, Aaron, Melinda, Jim, Jessica, John, Nick, Christine, and Rufino. Thank you for being a friend. You can head over to Patreon, www.patreon.com/movies that made us gay, to check out all the different tiers that we have for Patreon exclusive material.
By the time this episode comes out, our new newsletter for the month of March will be out.
Our newsletter should have dropped by now, and also we should definitely have another Watch With Us commentary track.
Yeah.
So keep checking back to see what's going on there. Would also love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review our show on Apple Podcasts.
Give us 5 stars. Smash those 5-star buttons
indeed,
to the
and
right.
Write us a good review. Only write us a review if it's a good one, though. If you have a bad one,
I don't want to hear a bad
I
one.
don't want to hear it. But yeah, go over to Apple Podcasts and do that. You can find us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Movies That Made Us Gay.
And Twitter at MTMUGPod.
Yes, indeed. I'm Pete, and I am on Twitter and Instagram at Peter Lasagna.
And I'm Oscar Scott on Twitter and Scott Youngbauer on Instagram. And look me up on Letterboxd at Scott Youngbauer.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for listening. Until next week, bye.
Bye.